called it love. But love was never supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to drain you, to make you doubt yourself, to leave you feeling small in your own body. But every time you showed up, they only took. And when you needed something back, silence, cold eyes, a familiar ache, you told yourself it was your fault. You just had to try harder, be better, be quieter, be less. But deep down, you knew something was off. They didn't love you. They loved what you gave them. Your silence, your loyalty, your ability to stay, even when everything inside you was screaming to leave. You were raised to believe that love means sacrifice, that the more you hurt, the more it must matter, that if you stay through the pain, you've proven your worth. But that's not love. That's training. Training to tolerate less. Training to survive what should have never been normal. And they knew. The more broken you became, the easier you were to control. You kept calling it love, but deep down you were starving. Not for attention, for safety, for space to exist without performing, to breathe without apologizing. But they didn't want you whole. They wanted you dependent. They wanted you doubting yourself just enough to never leave. So every time you spoke up, they called you difficult. Every time you asked for more, they called you ungrateful. And you believed them. Because when you're trained to see pain as proof of love, you stop trusting your own intuition. You confuse survival for connection and call it loyalty. But something changed. Not all at once, quietly, like a whisper growing louder. You stopped trying to earn their love, stopped chasing approval that never came, stopped bleeding for people who never offered you a bandage. You started noticing the patterns, how your love was always a transaction, how their affection came only when you were most obedient, most exhausted, most hollow. And suddenly you saw the truth. They never loved you. They needed you broken, because a whole you would never have stayed. You looked around at what was left. The silence, the self-doubt, the version of you built from pieces they approved of. You realized you'd been shrinking yourself to fit into their comfort, editing your truth so they could feel big. And you mistook that shrinking for love. You wore your wounds like medals, as if enduring was noble, as if breaking yourself was proof you cared. But love doesn't ask for self-erasure. It doesn't grow in manipulation. And it never demands your silence as its foundation. What they needed was your weakness. What you needed was yourself. Before you were broken, you were loud, curious, brave. You questioned everything. You loved deeply, but not blindly. You had a voice, and they couldn't handle it. So they taught you to doubt it, to question your instincts, to call your truth too much. Not because you were wrong, but because your clarity was a threat to their control. You weren't born broken. You were bent, folded into shapes that served them. But beneath every scar, you still exist, waiting, remembering, returning. You stopped asking them to see you. You started seeing yourself, not the version they shaped, the one underneath, the one that doesn't beg, the one that remembers her power before it was bartered for crumbs. You began reclaiming what they told you was too much. Your voice, your boundaries, your clarity, your no. And with every part you took back, you heard the noise grow louder. Their guilt, their manipulation, their fear of your awakening. Because when you stop needing their approval, they lose their grip. You started to rebuild, not who you were with them, but who you were before the breaking. piece by piece, not perfect, but real. You stopped shrinking in conversations, stopped apologizing for needing space, stopped explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. This wasn't revenge, it was resurrection, a quiet reclaiming of self, because healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the soft decision to never hand yourself over again to anyone who only loved your silence. Now you don't chase, you don't explain. You don't negotiate your worth with people who never learned how to value it. You've built boundaries, not as walls, but as doors with locks that only open for respect. You no longer fear being alone. You fear being drained. You fear being silenced again, and that fear keeps you awake, sharp, rooted, whole. Because the lesson wasn't just about them, it was about you, what you allow, what you protect, and what you'll never hand over again. Peace used to feel like someone staying. Now it feels like you walking away, without shaking, without explaining, without looking back. You stopped needing closure from chaos, stopped asking the wound why it kept bleeding. You learned to give yourself what they never could: stillness, safety, truth. Now you rest, not because you're numb, but because you're done. Done mistaking pain for purpose. Done confusing survival with love. Done letting broken people define your reflection. This wasn't an ending. It was a return. Not to who you used to be, but to who you were before the world taught you to abandon yourself. You stopped asking, "What did I do wrong?" and started asking, "What part of me let this feel like love?" And that question, that shift, is where your power lives. You're not bitter. You're clear. You're not cold. You're awake. And now that you've remembered, you'll never unsee it again. They didn't love you. They loved your compliance, your silence, your ability to stay small so they could feel big. But that chapter is closed. Not because they changed, but because you did. You don't need to be broken to be loved. You don't need to be soft to be worthy. You don't need to hurt to be chosen. You are not a mirror for their insecurity. You are not a placeholder for their loneliness. You are not a fix for someone else's emptiness. You are whole, and you are home. And now, you only open your doors to those who come with love, not hunger.